Hi, my name is Jason Sandy, and I'm an architect and property developer in central London. I've been mudlarking since 2012, and I've been a member of the Society of Thames Mudlarks since 2018.
And my name is Nick Stevens, and I've been a mudlark since 2008, and a member of the Society of Thames Mudlarks since 2011. I'm also the co-author of Thames Mudlarking, Searching for London's Lost Treasures.
Today, Nick and I want to show you some of the most extraordinary artifacts that have ever been found in the River Thames. We will demonstrate how these artifacts have actually changed some historical perceptions in the past. But first, we want to show you where it all began. London would not exist without the River Thames. Since the Romans founded Londinium in AD 43, the River Thames was the lifeblood and heartbeat of the city. Flowing through the heart of central London towards the sea, the Thames was a vital transportation link between London, the British Empire, and countries around the globe. When London was the largest port in the world, the congested river was filled with ships and boats of all sizes, from large ocean-going vessels to small rowboats with watermen transporting passengers from one side of the river to the other. For 11 continuous miles in London, both sides of the river were densely packed with docks, wharves, warehouses, shipbuilding yards, and shipbreaking yards. The active and vibrant riverfront was home to countless watermen, lightermen, stevedores, dockworkers, sailors, merchants, fishermen, and mudlarks. Over the past 2,000 years of human activity along the River Thames, countless objects have been intentionally discarded or accidentally dropped in its waters. For millennia, the Thames has been an extraordinary repository of these lost objects, protected and preserved in the dense, anaerobic, waterlogged conditions. Because of its close proximity to the sea, the water level of the River Thames in London fluctuates by 7 to 10 meters with the incoming and outgoing tides twice a day. As the murky waters of the river slowly recede, the exposed riverbed in London becomes one of the longest archaeological sites in Britain. In the 19th century, the original Victorian mudlarks scavenged for anything on the exposed riverbed which they could sell in order to survive. They were often children, mostly boys, who braved dangerous conditions to find practical items like coal, iron, copper nails, and ropes, which they could sell to buy food and essential items for themselves and their families. Out of desperation, the young children went mudlarking to survive. Today's mudlarks have a passionate interest in London's rich archaeology and history. Mudlarking has become a popular hobby which gives both adults and children a unique hands-on history experience and deepens our understanding of London's past.
This is the dangerous bit. What I don't want to do is to break it as I pull it out, because it's obviously very, very fragile and the mud is really compacted tight around this pipe. See, I could use my trub, but I'm actually just going to use my fingers here. Feeling pretty good. And there we go. Pretty good. So I reckon it's probably sort of mid-19th century. I think this could be a church warden's pipe, so that would have been around 36 inches long. So the end has been snapped off, but still, that's pretty good. I think that's been rolling around on the riverbed for about 150 years. So that is almost, that's like a cross-section of that. It would be like a basket, a tube that the fish would swim into, fish or eels would swim into. You'd have another collecting area. End of the day, you're going to come down and see what you've caught. So it's all woven basket work, reeds all woven together. We know these are Anglo-Saxons, so about 1300s. So that is a beautiful example. So when these come out, these don't last long. So a couple of days' time, that will have all been washed out, preserved in time for this very moment for us to appreciate.
In 1980, the Society of Thames Mudlarks and Antiquarians was founded, and the members were granted a special mudlarking license from the Port of London Authority. They formed a very close relationship with the Museum of London, which recorded the extraordinary artifacts found by the Society members. Through this fruitful collaboration over 4 decades, tens of thousands of historically important artifacts were acquired by the Museum of London. As part of the mudlarking license, all artifacts which are 300 years or older must be reported to the Museum of London, where they are recorded on the British Museum's Portable Antiquities Scheme. Every year, hundreds of Thames artifacts are recorded on pass. Now I'm going to show you some of the most extraordinary and historically important artifacts recovered from the River Thames over the past 200 years. In the Museum of London, there is an entire wall dedicated to ancient artifacts discovered in the River Thames. These artifacts include mattocks, flint tools, swords, rapiers, palstaves, socketed spearheads, socketed axeheads, flanged axeheads, daggers, sickles, and knives, which were all found along the River Thames in West London. This is one of the most interesting recent mudlarking finds. It's a Neolithic banded mace head, which the Museum of London has dated back to 2900 BC. The stone originates from Norway. This artifact is now on permanent display in the Museum of London. These are some of the oldest artifacts that have been recovered from the River Thames. The alderwood club there at the top of this image dates to 3500 BC and was recovered from the foreshore in Chelsea. On the left-hand side, you can see the Bronze Age tankard, which was dated to 1000 BC, and that was found along the foreshore in Kew in West London. On the right-hand side, you can see the Celtic Chariot mount, which was found nearby in Brentford, and it dates to about 100 BC. This artifact was found about 3 years ago by a mudlark in West London. It's a Neolithic skull which has been dated to 3600 BC, and this would have belonged to one of the first Londoners who lived along the river, and the Museum of London thinks that it could have belonged to one of the farmers in the agriculture communities that lived along the river. This is now on permanent display in the Museum of London. While dredging the Thames riverbed during the construction of Battersea Bridge in 1857, workmen discovered an exquisitely crafted shield decorated with swirling foliage, stylized animals, and inlaid with red glass. Known as the Battersea Shield and produced around 350 to 50 BC, this ornate bronze shield was probably not used in battle, but carried as a status symbol to display the wealth and power of the owner during ceremonies. The Waterloo helmet is another incredible Celtic artifact which was dredged from the Thames in 1868. Dated to 150 to 50 BC, it is the only Iron Age helmet with horns ever found in Europe. Formed from thin sheets of bronze and decorated in the lateen style, it would have once been highly polished and glistened like gold. The Battersea Shield and Waterloo helmet are two of the best examples of Celtic art ever found in Britain. This bust of Hadrian was dredged from the River Thames back in Victorian times during the construction works for the new London Bridge. It's believed that this head could have been attached to a statue that was on display in the Roman Forum in Londinium. This is an exquisite Roman sword which was recovered from the River Thames in Fulham. If you look closely, you can see the she-wolf with Romulus and Remus underneath the she-wolf. This is a famous symbol which represents ancient Rome. This is a fantastic connection to Roman times. This sword is now on permanent display in the British Museum. Mudlark Alan Sutty found this highly decorated Roman oil lamp that had been dropped in the river about 1,700 years ago. Stuart Wyatt, the finds liaison officer at the Museum of London, has described it as one of the best 4th century lamps to be found in the city, a rare survivor from the last days of Roman London. Extraordinary not only for its inherent beauty, it is also a rare example of a North African ceramic oil lamp from AD 300 to 410, depicting a running lion which symbolizes Christianity. Although similar tokens have been found in other parts of the Roman Empire, the first known Roman brothel token was discovered in Britain by mudlark Regis Curzon in 2010. Dating to the 1st century AD, this token, or spintria, depicts an explicit sex scene. On the reverse of the token, the Roman numeral 14 could indicate the value of the token or the price of the service. The spintria might have been used in a Londinium brothel in exchange for the act depicted on the coin. A few years ago, as I was mudlarking in central London, I stumbled across this carved Roman bone hairpin that's been dated by the Museum of London to between 43 and 100 AD. It's incredible to think that this is almost 2,000 years old and was just washed up by passing boats along the River Thames. It is now on permanent display in the Roman Gallery of the Museum of London. This is a Roman bone knife handle that was found by a mudlark a few years ago. It depicts a gladiator and he's holding a shield in his left hand. Over the last 40 years, mudlarks have found a vast array of medieval pilgrim and secular badges in the River Thames. Thanks to the mudlarks, the Museum of London now has one of the largest collections of medieval pewter badges in the world. These are two of the most exquisite medieval badges found recently by mudlarks Tony Tira and John Higginbotham. On the left-hand side of this image, you can see an intricate open-work pilgrim badge dating from the 14th to the 16th century, depicting the martyrdom of St. Thomas Becket. His head is bowed with his hands folded in prayer as a knight holds his sword ready to slay him. On the right-hand side, you can see a badge from St. Michael slaying the dragon. It's amazing how much detail is still preserved after being in the river for almost 600 years. This is one of the most extraordinary artifacts that was found in recent years by mudlarks. It's a Boar Badge that's been associated with King Richard III. Coincidentally, this was found in 2012, the same year that Richard III's body was found under the car park in Leicester. It's a great connection between London and Richard III. Mudlarks have found numerous pewter toys such as miniature domestic utensils, figurines, furniture, guns, cannons, watches, knights on horseback, and toy soldiers that have actually changed the way historians view the medieval period. Hazel Forsyth, senior curator at the Museum of London, has stated that these medieval toys are exceptionally rare and have helped transform perceptions of childhood during the Middle Ages. In the 1960s, French historian Philippe Ayres claimed that there really wasn't such a thing as childhood in the Middle Ages, and that parents didn't form emotional attachments with their offspring. For many years, people believed this. The pewter toys which mudlarks have found from this time period contradict what Philippe Ayres claimed about childhood in the Middle Ages. In light of the new archaeological evidence, Forsyth says that we now know that some parents from the Middle Ages were very devoted to their children and gave them every luxury and pleasure they could afford. The Museum of London has done a lot of research about these mudlarking finds, and they've written several books that are very interesting and cover a lot about the history of these artifacts. My favorite is Toys, Trifles, and Trinkets, which was written by Hazel Forsyth along with Jeff Egan, and this talks about the amazing pewter toys that have been found in the river. Another fascinating book is called Pilgrim Souvenirs and Secular Badges, which was written by Brian Spencer, and this covers a lot of the pilgrim badges and secular badges which have been found in the River Thames by mudlarks over the years. This interesting artifact is a ball and chain which was found by mudlarks a few years ago. This artifact is still a mystery. No one knows if the person who was wearing this drowned in the Thames or actually made a perilous escape from the ball and chain. In 2015, mudlark Tobias Netto discovered an extremely rare 19th century Victoria Cross medal in the River Thames. This particular medal was awarded to a soldier for his act of valor during the Battle of Inkerman in the Crimean War. The Victoria Cross is the highest military decoration which can be awarded to members of the armed forces of the British Commonwealth countries. The date 5th of November, 1854 is stamped on the reverse of this VC medal. The cross was originally suspended from a bar in which the recipient's name, rank, number, and unit were engraved. Unfortunately, the suspension bar is missing, so the identity of the soldier who received this VC medal remains a mystery. Nick started mudlarking back in 2008, and he has discovered some incredible artifacts along the River Thames. Many of these objects are thousands of years old. One of his best finds was even featured on the cover of Current Archaeology magazine.
So, as a lover of fossils, when I spotted this, I could not believe it. Here we go. I don't know if it's pretty obvious to you. It was pretty obvious to me when I found it. It's very tooth-like. Strangely, I found it on top of a barge bed, which is a strange place to find such a fossil. When I got it home, did a bit of research, I discovered that it was a tooth from a shark, a prehistoric shark called a megalodon, which lived about 16 million to 2.5 million years ago. So pretty old. I wasn't sure if this was a native prehistoric creature. I thought perhaps these things only lived elsewhere in the world, but actually this creature, the megalodon, used to swim around the British coast all those years ago. It's quite worn. If you find them in excellent condition, they still have the serration on, but this is actually quite worn, obviously due to the River Thames. And my research sort of showed that it was washed out of the Essex clay, and it just kind of got washed out and washed down the river and thrown up onto this barge bed where I found it. It has such a beautiful patina on it. I'll have a close up in a little while and you can see close up what it looks like. But this is my best fossil that I've ever found. I've found quite a few fossils, mostly sea urchins, sometimes bits of coral, but this is a complete one-off for the River Thames. Megalodon tooth. So my oldest handmade find is this, which is a handmade flint tool. It's called an adze, and the type and style is called a Thames pick. And the reason why is because this type of design is only ever found in the Thames Valley, and it's Mesolithic, and it's dates from about 8,500 years BC. So very, very old. When I saw this, I knew exactly what it was. This had been on my bucket list for quite a while. I always wanted to find a nice piece of worked flint, so when I saw it, I kind of knew exactly what it was. And I remember picking it up and just thinking to myself, wow, the last human being to have this in their hand would have been somebody that lived, 10,000 years ago, which kind of blows your mind really when you think about it. As to why it was in the river, obviously we'll never know, but it's quite possible that this might have been a votive offering, so sort of placed into the river to the river gods in the hope that you might hope for good crop, healthy children, living a long life, whatever that sentiment might have been as to why it was placed in the river. Possibly it was accidentally dropped. Obviously, as I said, we'll never know. But it's such a tangible object to have it in your hand and feel it. It's very weighty, and and there it is, handmade flint adze from the River Thames. Roman coin. So we find lots of Roman coins on the River Thames. They're mostly quite worn, but now and again you can find one that's in really good condition, which this particular example is. This is a coin of Hadrian. Dates from about 117 AD. And what's so special about this coin is that on the reverse we have Britannia. And this was the first use of Britannia on a British coin. It wasn't until many years later, until Charles II, around 1672, decided to use the Britannia again and put her on a farthing. 1672, Charles II. This was an amazing day when I found this. I was out with some friends who had some younger children, and I was trying to be enthusiastic and encouraging as to what we might be able to find. And we all got a bit bored, we'd not really found much, and then all of a sudden I saw this, just the loop sticking out the top of the mud, and I thought it was a key, so I gave it a pull and nothing happened, and instantly I knew what it was. So I gathered everybody around and I said, okay, I think I know what this is. I think this is a syringe. It might not be whole, but let's pull it out and let's see. So we pulled and pulled, and literally this came out of the mud. And it's a syringe, but it's not any old syringe. This has a very specific purpose, and it's to cure syphilis. So this would have been filled with mercury, and injected in a certain place, and the idea was that the mercury would actually kill the syphilitic disease. What they didn't realise actually was that injecting mercury into you did a lot more harm than good. Thanks to the Thames mud, the preservation of this artefact is exceptional, to the point where, when I'd cleaned it out, I was able to simply unscrew it, and the whole thing comes apart. It's only missing a little leather washer, which would have kept the seal inside, so it could force out the mercury. Often administered by the ship's doctor, it was also self-administered, so you could treat yourself with the mercury, and it's still perfectly functional. It's Georgian, so about 1800, something like that, and in complete perfect condition. Syphilitic syringe. So this is probably my most famous find that I've ever found. Obviously I couldn't bring the bones with me today, but this is exactly what I saw on that particular day. This is what I saw staring up at me out of the mud. This skull. And it turned out to be a young child of about 12 years old, and carbon-14 testing dated her to around 1730. And initially I just found the skull, and very quickly I called the police, because that's what you do. And it took them quite a while to come down onto the foreshore. By that time the water had come in and covered up the skull, but luckily I'd put a marker in place, so I was able to go out and retrieve the skull from the riverbed, and that's all we thought there was. And the police said that they went back a couple of days later to see if there was any more bones, but said they couldn't find anything. So it was about a year later that I went back to the same spot with Natalie from Thames Discovery, and we were digging around in that area, and we found a few more bones which she was convinced were human bones. So she said we need to stop and we need to come back with some of her colleagues from Thames Discovery, which is what we did the next day. And we did a full excavation and managed to find the rest of this poor unfortunate person. In total we found about 97% of the bones for this poor child, which are now at the depot at Eagle Wharf Road. I've been to a few lectures where they've used the entire skeleton laid out in all the bones in the right order, and it's one of the best articulated skeletal remains ever found on the River Thames, and this is what I saw on that particular day.
Over the past 40 years, modern mudlarks have discovered and recovered vast amounts of historical artifacts. A few years ago, the Thames Museum Trust was founded in order to create a new museum dedicated solely to the archaeology of the River Thames.
Our aim is to tell the story of London through finds made by us mudlarks. With many people that have taken up this hobby now, our own collections are vast, but unfortunately most of it just sits at home, gathering dust in boxes under our beds and in cupboards. Our idea is to have a location where all of these finds can be displayed for members of the general public to come and enjoy. We are now a registered charity, and one of our aims is to offer an educational program to schools and colleges. This would involve some classroom activities as well as some foreshore excursions where kids can really get their hands dirty and really find out what hands-on history really means. Whilst we have been gathering interest in the Thames Museum, a few years ago we decided to take the museum to the people.
We have organised several mudlarking exhibitions in various venues around London, including the Tate Modern and British Museum. Collaborating with the Thames Festival Trust, Hannah Smiles and Florrie Evans, we have also exhibited mudlarking finds at the Art Hub Studio and Barge House Gallery during the Totally Thames Festival. The Thames Museum is currently organising new exhibitions later this year.
If you would like to find out more, please visit our website www.thamesmuseum.org.
If you want to see and read more about the extraordinary historical artifacts recovered from the River Thames, you can check out the new book, Thames Mudlarking, Searching for London's Lost Treasures, which Nick and I wrote together. The book includes over 160 color photographs of hundreds of historically important artifacts discovered by 50 mudlarks in London. Written chronologically, the book takes you on a journey through time. Each artifact gives you a unique glimpse into life in London over the past 2,000 years. The Thames Mudlarking book is now available on Amazon, Waterstones, Foyles, W.H. Smith, and most online bookstores. We would like to thank Current Archaeology for inviting us to speak at this conference. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed our presentation.